think we'll get going. Thanks for coming. You all having a good day so far?
Yeah.
Pretty cool agenda. I've seen some good stuff on forestry and regulations. A lot of stuff, a lot of big issues getting discussed. So I'm Mark Cannella, University of Vermont Extension. A little bit of background. I've been doing farm business planning one-on-one with all sorts of farms in the state for a little over 10 years. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I started to do a lot of focused work with maple producers. So I'll be talking a little bit about finances from our benchmarking project and can share some of the insights from that. But I just want you to know, like a lot of my work has been with producers, just dealing with situations, dealing with what individual producers are trying to figure out, try to decide on, or try to plan for their operations. So my goal for any presentation is just kind of tell you some of the observations I've made and really try to throw some questions at you as we go. So I'd encourage you to share ideas if you got them, and just ask questions as we go. I've been doing this for long enough to know that I'll probably talk way too long, and we'll look at the clock and be like, oh, it's 2:30, it's time to end. So we probably won't have a pile of time for questions at the end, so I'd suggest don't save them. Just fire away. And the cool part about talking about economics and business in a group, I think, is that a lot of you, if you're business owners, do a lot of this by yourselves, deal with a lot of this stuff in your head, which is okay. But we got a group of people here. So questions, comments, I think it's a great opportunity to use the 15, 20 people in the room. So with that, how about just show of hands, how many people actively making maple syrup? Anybody making any other products other than maple syrup? Okay, so it's not just syrup. Do we have any lenders in the room? Any capital providers? This morning we had some lenders in the room. We don't have any lenders. We got any lawyers in the room? All right, we're safe. Any tax collectors in the room? Okay, now we can really talk business. There's no tax collectors. Cool. Quick thank you, USDA Agricultural Marketing Service. I actually mentioned this, if you're from Vermont or pay taxes in Vermont, a lot of work has been done over the past few years to move certain public funds into maple development, into maple research, into maple education. So we do thank our congressional delegation, aside of any other politics, that there's a lot more resources flowing into states across the country to support maple. In Vermont, we've been benefiting from them, and it supports the work I'll share with you today. Some of my goals for today, I want to share some of the business education resources that have been developed and that'll be coming in the next year or two, because we're on projects to develop more resources. We're going to talk about maple economic trends. We did a survey this fall, got a little over 300 respondents from across the Northeast, and I'm going to share the results that we've got, some preliminary results, some facts and figures, and what I'm going to do is share them, and I want to ask kind of what you think, because it's always good to spot check if a survey trend is real to you. I can show you an average, but you may be on the left or the right side of average. So it's good to talk through these things and figure out, what does this mean? And hopefully we'll get to it, share a little bit about cost of production profiles, which I've shared in years past. I don't have a lot of new information, but just to look again at the numbers, how much it costs and what people are generating from their operations. If you haven't seen this floating around, here's a couple websites that I think are worth checking out. www.mapleresearch.org. This is a new kind of venture over the past maybe year, with a number of maple researchers and producer associations trying to consolidate research and information for maple into one place. So that's a new one, and there's going to be a lot of stuff there, and there's a lot of new stuff that'll be showing up there. So I'd encourage you to check that out. This morning, I think there was discussion a little bit about how come we're not doing more to market maple as a forest-friendly product. Kind of a marketing question, but this is the kind of website where if anyone puts together any forestry research on, say, carbon sequestration or climate change, it's very likely to end up here. So if you're a maple marketer and you're trying to figure out, well, what story am I telling, that's a good place probably to see where this primary literature is going to start to be put. And a lot of it's coming, and a lot of it hasn't happened yet, but that's where it'll be. UVM Proctor Maple YouTube channel. Anybody check this one out? Some folks? It's a good one, and I think they're putting out some short videos and putting out more production techniques, grading, and I think some forest health and tree health and tapping practices will show up on that channel in the near future. And then UVM Extension Maple program is a broader website, but another great resource to a lot of different things for production. So check that one out. This is a new one that my team has just developed for more on the business side and forestry side. If you've noticed today, there's a handful of presenters that are talking about silviculture and forest management specifically for maple. They've actually, a lot of those folks have had long careers, but across the whole region, the concept of talking about maple production in silviculture is a bit of a new concept. There's a lot of foresters, a lot of professionals that have managed woods for growing stems, for growing timber, for growing lumber. So there's really going to be a new push to advance forestry planning and forest health in the context of modern maple, in the context of tubing systems, in the context of high vacuum, in the context of however people are getting out into the woods. So we're going to have that on this website. There's going to be new forestry resources showing up. I'm working on a number of legal resources and templates. We've got a new sugar bush lease down here, and there's actually more on the table downstairs, but we've worked with a lawyer, and we've got a lease template there, a basic lease template, and we're going to be working on a few more legal templates. Our goal is to do some basic skeletal stuff on these things, legal relationships, which would cost you a lot of money. It's not going to carry you across the finish line, but if you could pick up some of these resources and then maybe only have to hire an attorney for an hour instead of 5 hours, we're hoping we can add that value. There's business planning tools on this website you can check out. And then there is an Ask the Team button, which we're encouraging folks, send in your questions about maple business management, economics, or forestry. And we've got a group of specialists that are going to kind of, I don't know what the term is, we're going to watch it, answer the questions, and archive the answers. So that's a new website, maplemanager.org. And this is just a look at one of the maple business tools that we've got up there, which I've worked with a lot of people on to develop, and I think will be helpful. This one's a pricing and sales forecast tool. So you could take your crop, you could do it in bulk there on the left, saying amount sold 25,000 pounds, and establish a market price just to see, am I going to be doing a $20,000 business or a $40,000 business? But there's also an option to incorporate retail or wholesale, where you can work through package size. We've got a drop-down menu, pick all your package sizes, and we're encouraging people to play with the price a little bit. Sell pints for $12, and say you're going to sell 100 gallons of those and see how much sales you're going to generate. But if you want to play around with the price a little bit and see what happens if you bump it up to $12.75, or what happens if you sell for $11 a pint, see how that plays through mathematically, and then help build that into your business plan. And there's going to be a number of other calculators. That's just one of them that's there now. Okay, last little program plug that I'll lean on for the finances. We do have a benchmark program. We've been working with producers from about 3,000 taps to about 15,000 plus over the past several years. Program shifted a little bit. For the next 3 years, we're going to be looking for people in the 15,000 tap to 30,000 tap scale to tackle some research questions. So if that's you, or you know friends or neighbors that are in that scale, feel free to contact me about this maple program. But the goal of this is that we're trying to figure out the finances behind the scenes from these operators in a confidential research function, which enables us to come to conferences like this and tell people, what do the finances look like across the industry? What do these business models look like? So we'll be plugging away at that across a number of states over the next 3 years. I will say, if you're not in that 15,000 tap plus range, that doesn't mean you're not eligible for other business planning programs. We've still got, within UVM Extension, Farm Viability Program, which provides one-on-one business planning, and we also have a Forest Business Coaching Program. So whether or not you do want to do a cost analysis like we do in our benchmark, if you'd like to work with a business planner, we have resources within UVM to do that. So again, contact me afterwards. Be glad to tell you what we've got. These are things I mentioned. Sugar bush lease. I've got a copy of that down here. Binding contracts we're going to tackle in the next several months. We want to know what kind of formal relationships people want to have established if they're selling SAP, if they're have some sort of syrup marketing relationship set up where they're buying and selling product back and forth. So we want to look at those binding contracts. These projects are as much to develop legal frameworks as they are for me as an educator to just give people good checklists, questions that you should ask your business partner. I'm not going to say that you've got to document these relationships in a binding contract. We're going to go that route with our lawyers to provide some templates. But we'd like to just have people know how to ask the right questions to a SAP buyer or a SAP seller so nobody gets burned, so nobody gets surprised. So that's as much of these relationships is it's just being able to communicate. We're going to get into partnership formation in this project as well. We're going to assume that not everyone's going to own their own property, manage their woods, manage and own all the investments, and carry the product or the production of SAP straight through to the sale of finished syrup. Because we are seeing partnerships develop where landowners that own land that don't know anything about making maple syrup want to actually have a business relationship with an operator. They want to bring somebody onto their property, but they want to run it together. And so as this maple industry expands, which we'll talk about today, I think we just want to flex people's muscles into these different business models that are totally feasible, but they may require a different level of planning because now you got like 3 human beings making decisions or 3 bank accounts that have to interface. It's a little different than the owner-operated model. So keep an eye out for those legal resources. And if you've got ideas or questions, contact me because we've got a lawyer on retainer and we're trying to develop these things to serve the community. Okay, so I'm gonna move into this survey. I'm gonna share this information. Please ask questions, especially if I start putting these figures up. If you've got a question about the units, what this thing is telling us, or if you're really good looking at this and being like, you'll be able to look at these figures and say, what is this not telling me? So we'll put these up and we'll have a conversation. We got surveys from mostly the Northeast. Most of the responses are from Vermont, New York, and then more minor would be New Hampshire, Maine, a couple from Pennsylvania, a handful of responses from New Jersey, 1 or 2 from West Virginia, some from Ohio, a couple from Minnesota. But so it's a mix. Average taps from this survey, 3,988 taps. That's the average. That means we've got some people in this survey in the data that I'm showing you that's got 50 taps, and we've got other people with 100,000 taps. So you can think what you want about averages. Median is a statistic that we often use. And the median is where you take the first person with 50 taps and the 312 survey respondent with 100,000 taps, and you put them all in line. 50 taps, 50 taps, 50 taps, 1,000, 2,000, a whole bunch of them, 2,000. And then over here you got a couple 4,000, 5,000. And then you got your 100,000 tap operation. The median is you pick the middle one. It's a different way to look at the spread. And the median is 1,000 taps. So that tells me probably that we've got a smaller number of really large operators in this survey that are pulling that average up to 3,988. But the majority of the people in this survey are going to be pushed down closer to 1,000 or sub 1,000, just to give you a sense of the spread in the responses. See a hand?
I thought the median was taking out the smallest and taking out the largest. A percentage, maybe 5% of the smallest, 5% of the largest, to give you more of a median. Because one large 200,000 tap operation can skew it so far north.
It does skew it, but I've never known the median to take anybody out. It's just the median will line them up and pick the midpoint. But what you're talking about would be a potentially, in statistics, which I'm not a specialist, there is a concept of outliers and removing outliers. But there is a process, and I don't know how you validate it, where you might whack off some of the bottom part of the sample and the top to get more in that middle range. But you're thinking along the same lines of like, there are some people out on either kind of pole of this that if you're not careful, you can make some dangerous assumptions from the results. Average age of owners, 55. Anybody surprised by that? 55? How do we feel about a 10-year loan if you're 55 years old? Some people, lender, that's fine. Yeah. How do you feel about a 30-year mortgage if you're 55? No, it's a little different. Not right or wrong. Trend across agriculture is we have an aging agricultural population in this country. 55 is a little bit lower than the average farm age, but it still gets to that place where you've got a lot of the capital, a lot of the management, a lot of the operation is in an older generation. And we've got to consider from an industry standpoint, what does that mean for the replacement? What does it mean to be 25 or 30, to be trying to buy out this business or take over this business or be gifted this business? Things will be different in 15 years when the 55-year-old is 70. So this is something seriously to consider when you're looking at the just the overall development of maple as it grows. Okay, access to woods. So the survey, when we added up all the taps in our survey, rented and owned, we had about 1.2 million taps. No, I'm sorry. No, I think the survey actually had like whatever. This is the 1.2 is the amount of rented taps in our survey. The overall survey was whatever that factor of 42%. I think we had upwards of 2 or 3 million taps in the survey. Let's go with a percentage though. 42% of the producers in this survey rented taps. Just less than half of the producers that responded to the survey actually rented some form of tap.
So their full operation was rented taps, part of their operation?
Often a mix. And I haven't quantified how many of them are purely rentals or not. So great question. We don't know if they're exclusively renting and not owning. I do know that there's a good number of them that own some taps and then they're renting others. So when we look at so 42%, meaning a little less than half of the number of people that responded, rented taps, right? So if we had 10 of us in the room, 4 of us would be renting taps. The other 6 would just be owning them. But then if we count up their taps, someone renting 10 taps is different than someone renting 20,000. We get a little bit of a, not too different of a table there or a figure. The overall tap count, 61% of the taps from this survey were owned taps, 39% leased. I wasn't expecting to see this high a number, actually.
Well, is that, so if you have 10,000 taps and you lease 2,000 taps, does that put you in the leased category? Does that put you
Well, so if you said you rented, say you own 10,000 and rent another 2, you're going to be in that 42% of producers. So you're in the count of people that are using that rental tactic or technique, as part of your business model. This is where we actually counted the total volume of taps in the survey to see if there was some skewing based on if all the people that rented taps only rented, 45 taps in Ohio. Nothing against people in Ohio, but that would be of a much different magnitude. But what we found was when we added up the actual numbers, 40% of the tap count in the survey were rented, which tells me it's not just the little producers. There are some larger operations that are using rental and lease to, as a part of their business model. They're not purely owned taps business models. We asked about rental rates. We gave some kind of chunky categories to figure out where they fell. And if you look at the orange and the gray, the biggest chunks of the pie, you'll see that the majority of the tap rental rates are somewhere between 50 cents a tap and $1.24. 37% in the orange are 50 cents to 99 cents. 43% are to $1 to $1.25. And it's important to know that this is a 50-cent spread. This is a 25-cent spread. These aren't equal units. We try to figure out how to just get the numbers in one place to talk about. So the bulk of the tap rental is somewhere between 50 and 124. But if you're looking at 25-cent intervals, we can see that that's probably the hot spot or the norm for rental rates.
Are your percentages producers or tap numbers?
Let me just make sure I got this right. 43% of the producers that are renting taps are in that price zone. Right. Different than the magnitude of taps and what they were rented at. And I think we could figure that out from the data. Take a little while, but we can get there. Yeah. Good question. So that pie is 100% of the respondents, 100% of 312, and the 43% is 43% of 312 people reported that's how they're renting taps.
That doesn't include the cost of tapping. You have that in this, future slide as well.
When you say the cost of tapping, what do you mean?
Well, if somebody has a set of woods with 10,000 taps, it might cost you $15 a tap. The tap that you're, in the property,
Do you mean to pay for somebody to drill the taps in, or do you mean to hang the pipeline?
the hang the pipeline, to buy the spouts, to buy
Right.
the.
Yeah, that's not included here.
Right.
This is the cost to access the tap.
Correct.
Yep.
But you have that other cost on a future slide.
We haven't actually we didn't survey that in the survey. I can tell you what I hear. I mean, I hear from anywhere from $12 a tap to $18 to $20 a tap for the installation. I hear, again, this is observations, you guys chime in here. I hear $9 to $11, $9 to $12 in supplies and materials, and then generally $4 to $6 for a human being to actually install it, and that's where you get into the $15 plus range.
I heard 15 to 17.
Yeah, that would be for the investment to get the taps put up and the tubing system installed, materials and installation.
And you'd want a minimum of 10 years. If you rented a sugar bush, put that initial investment into it. If you want 10 years minimum to get that money back,
What do y'all think?
potentially.
10-year lease? Y'all like a 10-year lease?
Anybody do a 1-year lease?
No. Who would like a 15-year lease a little bit more than 10? Yeah, this morning, we'll talk about replacement times in a second, but this morning it was mentioned that I think the gentleman said that the longevity of tubing systems is becoming an issue for silvicultural practices. The tubing is actually lasting 15 years, whether it's main lines or laterals to be discussed, but they're lasting quite a while. So definitely, if you're a tenant, it's in your interest, I think, to negotiate the longer term, assuming you plan to be there.
What bothers me are these big operations that come up here and do 180,000 taps, and the site next year, they're not making any money, they leave.
Huh?
They got 450 miles of plastic in the woods.
I guess it just depends what side of the plastic sales equation you're on. Okay, good on rental rates? Is anybody in the $2 zone? We got a few there, and we hear about that here, especially in this region. This is a very competitive maple region as it relates to the whole Northeast United States. So we're in that zone where you hear about $1.50, $1.75, $2 a tap. If you were to mention that in another part of Vermont or another state, they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Different factors will impact the rental rates. Okay, what do we see from a production standpoint? 67% of the producers, 67% of those 312 across the Northeast are using reverse osmosis. Does anyone know when the first reverse osmosis started to be used for maple operations?
70s.
Yeah, some of the early adopters were using this technology in the 70s, and I know a few at least in the early 80s. It's taken actually a while for people to adopt the technology, but I'd say the past decade we've had rapid adoption. It's not without cost. And some of the people in the survey are certainly small enough or of hobby or lifestyle scale where I think that they're making decisions a little differently than just total pure efficiency. But still, 67% of producers using our average concentrations right now from the survey. We got 12 bricks or 12%. This morning we had a presentation about SAP Only operations, and I think I've got a slide a little bit in a second about SAP Only. But this RO is going to change the equation for the industry because there's a lot of producers that are potentially having more capacity to make syrup than they did previously. Whether it's tank or capacity for their rig, or it's just human time availability. So we had a big discussion about going SAP only. The assumption is there's a lot of extra capacity to make syrup as these technology innovations have happened. So the question for the industry is, do we need more people investing in all the same technologies to make syrup? Or is there a huge market demand right now for people to deliver clean, clear, cool, high quality sap to those that are set up to process it and turn it into syrup or other products? Something to think about. There's our tubing replacement from the survey. Spouts on 2 years. Everyone loves to do them every year, but let's be realistic. Do you all get every spout swapped out every year?
Don't you have to do organic?
Good question. I don't know. Do you have to do a spout replacement every year to be certified?
I don't think so.
We're thinking maybe not. I know best practice is people want to get rid of, disposable spouts. I think in 2002 when I first started sugaring, that was a new concept coming on. People were like, wow, these plastics really do hold some bacterial count. They can't be cleaned and they can't be sanitized, so let's cut them out. But 2 years, drops on 5 years, laterals on 9, mainlines on 14. That's what we're seeing. And I'm glad somebody brought it up from a rental relationship. These are things to factor in if you're going to go that way, figuring out what your time frame of lifespan is on that investment. How much time do you need to kind of work it through? Oh, sorry about the overlap there. Vacuum pumps. Ask people, what are your average readings? Full disclosure, I'm not a producer. We did not ask them where they measured their reading. We didn't ask them if they measured it at the sugar house or on the last tree. But we got these averages, 23 inches vacuum. That's what we're getting across the population. As we're talking about technology, we started to think about, are people at different scales adopting different technologies? So we looked at vacuum monitoring systems. People checked off all the different technologies that they used on their operation. Across the whole 312 responses, only 11% used vacuum pumps in blue, powered vacuum, and then the orange bar is the vacuum monitoring system, the tap tracks, remote sensing on your vacuum leaks. So let's start with the blue. Vacuum pumps. Almost 70% of the survey respondents are on vacuum. It's a technology that's been around, but it's been creeping up in utilization, and I think every year it sort of becomes more accessible to smaller producers as well as the technology evolves. Over 5,000 tap and over 10,000 tap operations. 100% of them on vacuum. There's not that many commercially minded operators, or there are none, that are actually not using vacuum. So this is a technology I think they're recognizing what it's going to do for them. And then here's another one, vacuum monitoring systems. Only about 11% of people are using them across the board. When we get to scale, just about 50% for both 5,000 and 10,000 tap operations. Does anyone think that vacuum monitoring is relevant to smaller scales? Anybody have any opinions on that? The vacuum monitoring systems?
Depends how much walking.
Necessary.
Say that?
Depends how much walking.
Depends how much walking you want to do.
Wow, it seems like you have a valve in the right spot. There's a lot of walking. I don't really know the cost of the system.
Right. So if you can cover the ground and you got the valves in the right place, maybe at a smaller scale it's really not necessary.
Yeah, stainless valves.
I work with a couple of producers on finances that have purchased vacuum monitoring systems. And I think this curveball that a lot of people have figured out was when they made the investment, they actually thought that they would reduce their labor time. They'd know where the leaks were. They'd reduce the time to go fix the leaks. It's not exactly what's happening. What do you think would happen once you knew exactly where all your leaks were?
You gotta go fix them.
You gotta go fix them, exactly. So the people that actually ran their partial budget analysis, their investment analysis, to justify the vacuum monitoring system, a lot of them thought it was going to be a trade-off for labor time. what they're finding is they're spending as much, if not more time in the woods. So they haven't shedded time. They haven't, trimmed out an employee or redirected an employee to something else. As much or more labor goes into the woods with the vacuum monitoring system. But what happens to the yields when you're targeted for your leak checking? The yields are going up dramatically. So they're actually not finding they're getting a cost savings for the vacuum monitoring system, but they're getting increased revenue for sure by the way they're managing it. A little bit on the forestry. Added up all those taps, the 3 million taps, and tried to figure out when people set up what percentage is red maple. About 20% red maple. Why do we care? Actually heard this morning in a forestry presentation that red maple exudes some sort of pheromone or chemical that the forest tent caterpillars do not like. That red maple is actually considered species diversity. Within the woods, it's a different species than Acer saccharum, than the hard or sugar maple, and that the pests that we're so concerned about actually will avoid them completely. So there's a factor, and I think there's actually some other research that's indicating red maples might have a different type of resilience to some of the climate change factors that's happening in the woods. I'm not a forester, people on my team are though, so they're gonna be dealing with this. So we're just trying to monitor this whole red maple thing from a forestry perspective. I know there's a lot of context there. People that used to never touch red maples or wouldn't be caught dead or wouldn't tell their neighbors they were tapping red maples. This isn't a conversation about syrup quality. This is now, we're kind of shifting to this silvicultural side of the different species and diversity. Following a professional forest management plan. Again, this morning talked about forest management. Who's making the decisions on tree thinning? Who's thinking hard about the future of that woods in 60 or 100 years? Not too many people are using professional forestry plans at all responses across the survey. When we look at the 5,000 tap and 10,000 tap scales, you can see that go up dramatically.
I think that's where the organic certification comes in again too, because to be organic, you do need to have a forestry plan.
You need to have it if you're organic.
So
Yep.
most of the people that are big are all organic because of the cost.
A lot of larger operators have converted to organic, or if not converted, started that way. Yeah, that could be a factor. There's another thing that I think relates to forestry management plans. Taxes. Real estate tax abatement programs, depending on your state and depending on your criteria for qualification. So the larger operations, they have an incentive, and they may actually have a requirement depending on how the policy and what their status is. So we're considering this both from a forest health standpoint, but there's tax implications. As new people get into the industry, having them understand what it takes to run an operation in the maple sector.
Mark, I'm surprised that over 10,000 taps is actually only at 80%. I would think that there would be many more people
Yeah.
have 10,000 taps that are in use value.
Right.
Because of the acreage that they're tapping. But you also have other states in here which
There's some other states, yeah, and that's a good point. It's like why would you not be under a professional plan and be under current use appraisal for forestry practices? And we don't know. Maybe we could peel back. Maybe we'll see that some of those operations are leasing parcels, scattered all over the county. That could be a factor. I was thinking maybe.
it could also be you're enrolled under ag, in which case you don't need enforcement.
Yeah.
You need fair use.
People familiar with that in Vermont that you can what's the word? Define, categorize yourself either for agricultural use or forestry use, and a different benefit or credit rate depending on which track you're going. Okay, 312 responses. Who's certified organic? If we looked at the whole population, just over 10% are certified organic. If we look at the over 5,000 tap group, 70%, and if we look at the 10,000 tap group, like 92% certified organic. Why do you think that is? Do we think that this group all has a different environmental ethic than the rest of the population? You think this is on philosophy and soil building alone?
No, it doesn't pay organic if you're small, right?
Right? No. I mean, let's not disqualify it. I think everyone in this figure and all the sugar makers are pretty serious stewards of the forest, without a doubt. And there's nothing wrong with being certified organic and getting 20 cents a pound more for it in the meantime. I think a lot of them did that calculation. Hopefully they did it before 2015, 16, 17 when the prices dropped and they were getting even, the 25% premium. But I know for a lot of producers, even 5,000, 7,000 taps, the difference between hitting $2.10 a pound and $2.30 a pound in 2017 and 18 really was keeping their business above board, not going into negative profitability. So that premium is a major factor. I don't know, did market expansion get discussed this morning at the panel? I got to the industry panel a little bit late. Anyone talk about market growth at all? This is what I heard in Middlebury 2 weeks ago. Going back maybe 2 or 3 years, I think people were pretty comfortable saying that the global market for syrup was moving positive 8 to 10%. What I've been hearing over the past year now is that they're feeling like market growth is really more like 6 or 7% right now. But the thing that's driving market growth is the organic segment. So that's what I've been hearing from some of the people at that level of shipping and packing. That the market growth is still there. It's softened a little bit, but the organic demand is the thing that actually is still pushing market growth, more so than the non-organic class of syrup. So we took the whole crop. I think this is the 2019 crop from the 312 participants in the survey, because I wanted to kind of get a sense of what's the distribution of big producers and small producers. So what you're looking at here is a pie chart of 100% of the syrup that was reported produced by the people in the survey across the Northeast. The green pie is people less than 5,000 taps. The reddish pie is 5,000 taps to 9,999. And the blue pie is 10,000 plus tap operators. 312 people in this survey. 65% of the production is coming from about 20 of them. Give you a sense of just the magnitude of what it means to have one really large operation and a number of smaller operations. There's no right or wrong here. There's nothing great about being big, and there's nothing awful or great about being small, but just the fact of what's driving the crop.
And it would seem that 70 or 80% would be organic out of the entire crop. If the 10,000 tap people are 90%
if you connect the certified organic status,
almost all or most of the syrup produced has been organic.
yeah, certified organic. And we know the survey hasn't caught everybody in the universe, but just gets us thinking about, like, I don't know, what does this mean? 65% of the crop is being produced by, I can't remember what it is, 8% of the population of sugar makers. We'll get you thinking about how decisions get made, industry leadership, how rules or regulations get set or not set. Again, I'm not saying good or bad, but just to think about, like, the nature of the industry. It's not like this is evenly spread, that there's the same number of 2,000 tap producers are making the same amount. It's biased, I don't know what the word is. It's unbalanced in a way. Green bar, economically viable. 20% of all responses. Over 5,000 taps, 60%. 10,000 taps, 60%. This is something, this is just a chunk of it, but we're going to look at this data to try to figure out if there is a break point. Where do we see the bending of the curve for people that are saying, I'm getting more economically viable? Is there a certain scale? Because we know there's nothing wrong with being smaller, but we know that from an economic development standpoint, people need jobs. We need these woods aren't just there to create labor, they also need to create jobs for people. So we're trying to figure out where is that break point where the enterprises are figuring out that they can cover costs and pay people their time. The larger operators are self-defining as being viable. SAP Only, here's an interesting one. Same tables I showed you before. This is the one a couple slides back. Economically viable, 24%, 60% were sustainable, vulnerable 15%. This is the whole population of respondents. The 2 or 3 dozen that were SAP Only enterprises. Look at that. 55% self-reported as economically viable. I showed this slide this morning and someone said to me, how long have they been in business? I was like, that's a really good question. Because if you're making syrup, you may not consider yourself economically viable for 7, 8, 12 years because you've got such an investment. If you're just investing in SAP Only enterprise, 2, 3 years down the road, you might be in that position. And we had a great conversation how the time factor is important here. Thinking about your own businesses, I'm less interested in the research finding here and more about individuals running businesses being able to decide, when do I need to be in the green bar? Do I need to be in the green bar in year 2 or year 4 or year 12 or never? It's an important business planning analysis to be able to have. So any questions? I think we're going to shift after this one. Just a second. Any questions on the viability? Any of the other slides? Technology? About forestry?
Did you have any breakdown of where the sales, are they bulk sales or wholesale or retail, or is this not in the survey?
It's in the survey. We haven't analyzed it yet. Yeah, so we have asked the blend there of bulk, retail, wholesale. I don't know if we got into online or how specific. So over the next 6 months, our goal is to go into those questions we haven't yet gotten and get some tables like this. Yeah, good question. We're psyched though. We got a good survey. We got a pretty good response rate, so we'll be able to pull some things out. Any other thoughts, questions before I go on?
Would the SAP Only economical viability point to a possible ramp up for a business to get to all right? If you're a small producer and you want to become a large producer, do you make some quicker economically viable money early,
Right.
while you invest in the end of the business that you maybe want, although maybe you never get there if you're already economically viable?
Right.
I can answer that, because we're there. We have been a SAP Only producer for 4 years, and this year's our first year that we built a sugar house, and we're stepping up and doing the whole process.
Okay.
And we went from 6,500 taps to 8,000. So, and we're looking at it as a retirement.
So did the SAP revenue, as you got started, help you with the capital expense of building out the sugar house and operation?
Yeah.
So eventually you are moving into syrup production.
Yep.
Yep.
This was all within a 4 year span.
Within 4 years. But I think that's a relevant point. I hear that for people that want to get started, but maybe don't want or aren't in the position to take on the capital of the whole supply chain from tree to finished syrup product. So you take part of it. Take SAP. Do it for a few years, learn your skills, make the decision once you're rolling in the money. If you're then going to park your money in a whole bunch of stainless steel for 12 more years. Right. But I think that's
economic viability isn't the posh lifestyle necessarily.
But I think that's very much the mindset is can you grab a piece of this thing before you grab the whole thing. I definitely know people that are making that decision. I know a lot of producers actually that are on that 55-year plus place, and they're asking themselves, we'd like to keep doing this. Are we going to keep doing all of it, or is it possible for us, in the light of the trends for food safety, traceability, possible sugar house certification that's certainly coming down the road at some point, do we want to make all new investments into our sugar house at this point in our life? Or can we just let that go and maintain the woods? And maybe through some unique partnership, bring on a business partner that wants to make the investment in the sugar house. So it goes both ways. I think there's some people looking to get in via SAP. I also know some people that are having a discussion about kind of getting out or sunsetting via SAP only, and saying, it's okay. We don't need to turn this into syrup ourselves. We can let somebody else handle that. All right, I'm gonna kind of go through some finances now, some chunky numbers. We've been doing this for several years now. Like I said, the research product now is really focusing on 15,000 tap plus. If you're in the 10,000 plus tap category and you're interested or close, definitely contact me, either for this research project. But it's also good to know that we do have business planning programs for folks at all scales in this state. So if you're interested just in that coaching relationship or advisory relationship, there are programs through UVM Extension. The specific research project is trying to answer that question of what does it look like at those scales, 15 to 30, but we've got other stuff available. Let's look at the cost. What we've learned from doing that benchmark work for several years with producers at that scale, maybe 3,000 to 15,000 taps. Top two expenses across the board. These are economic costs. These aren't all cash-based, but these are very real costs that you'll feel over the lifetime of the business. Top two expenses. If we took $1 of expense across the business and divided it up, or $100,000 of expenses and divided it up, how would it get distributed amongst the pie? 46% of it will be labor. Paid labor through employees, or the value of unpaid labor if you're an owner. We've tracked work hours with people. We've put some rough estimates on their time. Not at $40 an hour, not at $10 an hour. I think we're at like $22 an hour now as a kind of a blended cost. 46% is labor, human beings. 25% is depreciation. This is a heavy capital investment that's required for the tubing system and the sugar house processing and all the capacity. And we spread it over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, depending on the items that's on our depreciation list. So right there, you've got roughly 60% of the equation of costs. Human beings and the wear and tear on investments over the long term. The fact that's important is neither of these are cash expenses. You can volunteer your time and not pay yourself. And depreciation, if you've already acquired the asset and figured out how to do it, you're not writing a check for depreciation. So the biggest expense factors on a business are often things that don't get outlaid annually. Which means you may have a pile of cash in your pocket or in your business checking account if you decide to not pay yourself a wage, or if you're just kind of holding on to cash that theoretically might need to be saved for future repairs and reinvestment. So it is possible as a sugar maker, to look at these big costs, that actually this means a lot of cash is in your pocket because you don't have to write a check to anybody for it if you've already got the stuff. Meaning you probably want to have a plan, a capital reserve fund, knowing that the depreciation is going to come due in 10 or 15 years when the equipment cycles out. Any question?
That 25% depreciation, how does that relate to other industries?
I can tell you how it relates to dairy, and
It sounds terrible.
lean on you. I mean, if you looked at a dairy benchmark, still like maybe 10 to 12% depreciation on revenue. 25% would be a lot higher.
That would be very high.
This could be roughly double the benchmark compared to say a dairy operation. Yeah. So what this is saying is this is a capital intensive situation right now. Modern maple, even though there's a lot of labor involved, certainly a lot of labor, you need a lot of stuff, and you need access to capital to get into this game.
I also think it's interesting to point out that once you put the tubing in the woods, you can't ever recoup that cost. You're not going to resell your old tubing. Once you make that investment, it lasts for as long as it lasts and once it's gone. It's not like farm equipment where you can, if you decide you don't want to farm anymore, you can sell it. If you decide you don't want to make sugar anymore,
Good point.
it's a cost to take it out of it.
You can't put the tubing on a trailer and send it down the road to somebody else. No. You may be able to have somebody take over the operation, but that's a very different thing than putting a tractor on a trailer and selling it. Yeah. We talked earlier today, a lot of exposure out there in the woods as well. Anybody got insurance on a tubing system? Anybody know if you can buy a product? Because I would think with increased windstorms, severe weather events, that maybe having $100,000 of exposed capital asset out in the woods would be risky. A lot of exposure. This morning it came up, no collateral value on tubing. You're trying to put together a capital package? There's no collateral value there. No resale. Yeah, so the capital formula can get tricky. And I'm not going to discredit all these other expense categories, but I will just emphasize that they are somewhat minor compared to the two biggest pieces of the pie. And I do think the people that are the most profitable and the most successful that I work with are seriously looking at labor efficiency. If not cutting labor, they're trying to figure out how to get the most revenue and production from the human hours in their job. And they're very mindful of their investments. Not to say that they're not investing, but they're aware of their investments and they're making strategic plans to utilize the resources or make them last even longer. Some of the most profitable businesses in my benchmark don't do 25% depreciation a year. They're down closer to the low teens. That means they're using old stuff. That means their sugar houses don't look that good. This is going back a couple years, 2017, to give you a sense of some of the averages. When we look at just the bulk producers in our study, our average cost of production that we've calculated is about $2.20 a pound. This is a really chunky number, but this is around where the market's at, which means when the market goes to $2.50 a pound, people are actually doing pretty good. When the market's at $2.15 a pound or $2.10 a pound, these people are not at break even. This is that range we're in right now, where the markets are, and for bulk producers in this scale. Again, 3,000 to 15,000 is what most of these numbers are based on. So we're close to that place where people are doing okay, or they're thinking, how many years can we do this without maybe not cash flowing or maybe not generating profits? The number in the middle, the retail and wholesale mix, this is a little bit, I don't know, it's a number. I don't think it's really valuable because you've got some bulk producers that are wholesaling 15, 20% of their crop, and then they go into this mixed category. So if I say $3.84 a pound or $42.75 per gallon, I don't really know if that number is helpful, but I do want to tell you the strategy, that there's a lot of bulk producers that are realizing if their costs are not $2.20, but their costs are maybe $2.30 a pound, they're saying to themselves, it's not in my interest to put another pound of syrup in a barrel and sell it if I can't get paid back. So I'm going to do a little bit of marketing. The most painless marketing that I can manage to get some premium and to bring my overall pay price up a little bit to get us in a better place. So I wouldn't use that number so much as I'd use the strategy of saying, how do people blend in a little bit of retail or a little bit of wholesale in with a bulk operation to float the boat? A lot of folks are thinking about that. And then the all retail, older numbers, but I think I've observed from other people that I have run the numbers on, these numbers resonate. The cost, anywhere from 3,000 to 8,000 taps, if you're going to retail all of it and do a lot of direct marketing, online, in person, farmers markets, and some of this maybe is even going a little wholesale to stores, 80 to 90% per gallon equivalent cost. There's a lot of labor time required in marketing, and we track it for the people that are doing direct marketing. So the people that are convinced that they want to chase the highest value in the marketplace, you need to realize that comes at a cost, and it's your time. And if you're actually paying for yourself for your time, $80 to $90 per gallon equivalent cost.
I don't understand what you mean by cost there.
So the whole cost of the business, running the maple operation, making the syrup, and then adding on the function of the labor for sales and marketing, delivery, that whole component would be part of that full cost. And the per gallon equivalent, if I've lost anyone, this isn't selling syrup for $90 a gallon. It's when you spread the pints, the gallons, the half gallons across. This would be what the blended return would have to be. So some of the strategies, I think I mentioned some of these. The bulk producers, they're investing in woods labor. Whether they've got the vacuum monitoring or not, you've all heard it, you're making your money in the woods. They're working hard to find the leaks and increase their yields. That's their, this is their focus. This is what the top performers are focused on. They're focused on enhancing yields in the woods. They're considering if they can find an easy wholesale market for 10% of their crop. Does anyone think this is getting easier in the small state of Vermont? No. There's a lot of bulk producers over the past 3 years that aren't making break even. They're moving into the wholesale market. And if any of you have been retailing or wholesaling, you're feeling it, I'm sure. I'm told that there isn't necessarily downward price pressure right now in some of the direct grocer chains. Like, no one's really getting undercut on prices, but there's just more options available. And you've got variety now. You got infused syrup. So it's not that people are going to undercut your price, but there's maybe 2 or 3 more brands that are on the shelf that are kind of cutting up the pie. Everyone's getting a little bit smaller piece of the pie now. Here's a great concept though. Purchase SAP, spread out fixed costs. A lot of folks are trying to figure out if within their region they can find a way to get more SAP and move more SAP through their sugar house. They're not so interested in putting out taps of their own. They're trying to figure out if they can buy the SAP in from somebody else. These are all those different things where maybe they can get their revenue up above $2.30, $2.40 a pound for revenue. Briefly, retail wholesale mix. We could talk for ages about this. How do you make it happen? But the goal is, on a per gallon equivalent, that whole market spread is getting at least $80 equivalent. So breaking it up into half pints and pints or nips or whatever it is, trying to figure out how to get your blended average above 80 or 90 to cover the cost. And I think this is the dangerous thing about retail marketing is it's tough to track time, but your time is the most expensive thing. So if you don't have a good way of doing that, you're going to have a tough time understanding where you really need to be pricing at. So really going for a higher value and making sure you get it. Okay, quick outlook. Continued expansion. Production expansion's happening. What we're hearing is the production has softened a little bit in the past few years. Prices are down, no real surprise. The survey is showing, we haven't done all the numbers, but the survey is showing we got about a split, about half the people looking to continue to expand, half the people staying about where they're at, but we haven't filtered that for the scale of the enterprises to know like how many more taps we could expect coming on. I mentioned that the growth is really being driven by the organic segment right now. And I think I'll just close with the market development side, especially if you're marketing syrup. I think that we're going to find that the price pressure is really going to depend on your differentiation or your lack of differentiation. There's new products, new packaging. I've been seeing a lot of glass out there, and it's a great thing. I've been checking prices in the grocery store, and I'm just thinking, wow, like how does glass taste? Because when you look at all these products, and I know some of them, I know some highly reputable producers that all have super high quality syrup in the bottle. And one of them is in plastic at a certain price per unit, and the one right next to it is in glass at the same store at a very different price per unit. And I'm left to myself thinking, wow, consumers are like amazing creatures. Some of them want it in glass, some of them will take it in plastic. No right or wrong, but you'll see, I'm sure you're all seeing that now. Tons of different products popping up. Beverages, April's Main Line. I pull this out because anyone drink Knob Creek? No one drink Knob Creek in the room? This looks just like the font, the bottle, the wax top. It's exactly like a very well-respected bourbon product. So you've got a lot of this happening right now, and this is, I think, the world that you're all in is, can you differentiate in the marketplace? And I think that's going to have a huge impact on your individual outlook and the direction of where the maple industry goes now as these new products unfold and become available. Well, I'm going to stop there. Maybe take a minute or two for some last questions, and let you get on to your next session. Good?
Yeah.